we have today with us our very first interviewee, Will Bishop, who probably doesn't need much of an introduction if you're part of the Reddit and Apple community, because you're pretty prolific on the subreddit, aren't you, Will?
On the Apple Watch subreddit, yeah. I haven't got much love over on the Apple one yet, but I can work towards that.
I'm sure I've seen some of your posts on the Apple subreddit, but Will is the developer of Chirp and Nano. So Chirp is the Apple Watch app for Twitter, and Nano is the one for Reddit. So I saw a post of yours on Twitter, Will, that your favorite podcast is No Such Thing as a Fish, and it also happens to be mine. After, of course, the r/Apple show.
Yep.
Have you been a fan of No Such Thing as a Fish for long?
I think I've been listening to them probably for a little over a year now, and I've actually listened to every episode since I started. But I started listening to them probably 3-4 years ago, or maybe, I don't know how long they've been around, but a long time ago. And I didn't like them. I don't know what it was. I just thought, no, don't like this podcast, and stopped listening to them. And then I saw them being recommended over and over and over again, and I gave them another shot, and I don't know what changed, but when I came back to them, I decided I really liked them. And then one of my favourite podcasts ever, which was called We Have Concerns, ended quite recently. And so when that ended, I went back and listened to all of the No Such Thing as a Fish episodes they've ever made. And yeah, now I really like them now.
I didn't think you could actually listen to like the first 50 or so episodes. I thought they were gone from the podcast directory now, or is that not the case?
Okay, yeah, maybe I have missed the first 50 because I remember them talking about that. So actually, maybe I've got another 50 I can listen to. Thanks.
If you track them down, let me know.
I think they're on the website.
Okay, cool. But anyway, you are from Adelaide, and there are a couple of watch developers in Adelaide, hey? What is it about your little city?
I don't know. I think we just have nothing else to do, so we just decide to make apps for the watch. We've got Quentin, I don't know how to say his last name, Zervas. He makes the app Outcast, the podcast player for the Apple Watch. And then there's another developer called Russell Ivanovic. He works on Pocket Cast. So I guess maybe we're just a little podcasting city. And then I took up Twitter and Reddit. But yeah, it seems to be a lot of us in Adelaide.
I had no idea that Pocket Cast was also out of Adelaide. I thought it was just you and Quentin. That's cool.
Yeah, Pocket Cast too. I actually went to their offices a couple months ago to interview them for a school project. So I got to meet them and meet some of their team. It was good fun. And
Quentin also made maybe one of the first apps I think I ever downloaded, because he's the developer behind Streaks.
That too.
Thinking back, like when I had an iPhone 3GS, or a long time ago at least, Streaks was around then on my home screen. So he's been in the developing business for ages.
Yeah, he's been there a long time. So yeah, I forgot. Yeah, he makes Streaks too. I haven't tried out Streaks. I feel like I couldn't be dedicated enough to actually add things and keep up to date with everything, but it's a good idea.
I hadn't heard of Streaks. I'm Googlier right now.
Yeah, it's a great little app, just as a little sidebar here. But you can say, like, I don't know, if you want to give up caffeine, say, and then you can fill the circles each day and build up a little streak, and it can show a little notification badge for how long your streak is if you wanted, although that would cause me no end of stress. Yeah, it's a great app, and it has been developed for a long time now.
And it's got a really nice, like, minimalist design to it. So,
yeah.
I'll have to check it out.
So I heard somewhere, Will, that it was actually BlackBerry that got you into like handheld mobile technology, which is pretty crazy. So that means you have like mobile technology has been a thing, like mobile handheld tech has been a thing for as long as you've been interested in tech.
Yeah, well, so I was probably, I don't know how old I was. I probably change my age every time I tell the story. But I think I was 3, 4-ish, I'd say. I used to go out with my mum when she went out with her friends to get coffee. And I'm still the same as I was then, in that I'm very, very impatient. and I need to be occupied by something all the time. And so when I was that age, I couldn't just sit there while my mum and her friend talked. So at one point, my mum's friend gave me her BlackBerry phone, and which was covered in buttons because it still had the physical keyboard. And so I was just pushing all the buttons, and I loved it because, you know, I'm 3 or 4 and I'm easily entertained. And so I had all these buttons to press, and I could probably press them for hours and hours on end. So before the BlackBerry, I was interested in buttons and pushing things and anything that clicked. And so I think the BlackBerry, with covered in, you know, 40 or however many buttons, was just like the dream of mine. And so since then, I've just always been interested in tech and interested in mobiles, computers, and everything, which kind of led me to being on this podcast, I guess.
And before you went into school and started doing tech at school, did you experiment in any way with developing at home, or, you know, going further into just playing around with devices?
Yeah, well, I didn't get my first tech thing at school until I was in year 8. So I'm in year 11 now. So about 3.5 years ago was the first time I actually got to do anything with tech at school. And before that, when I was in primary school, I made a couple text-based games in a language called Batch, which is only on Windows computers. And Batch is a, you know, neat little language, but I wouldn't want to go back to it. It's kind of like Bash, really. And so I made some text games and played around in Photoshop a lot. But it wasn't until year 8 that I actually started proper programming in a language called Python.
Batch sounds like a thinly veiled insult you might hurl at someone.
It's basically that. I still work in Batch at my office, so...
Oh, jeez. I'm sorry.
It's very rare, but yes, it's a headache every time I have to.
Yeah. Good for text-based games, though.
That's right.
So I believe you also were started to be instructed in Flash while you're at school. Have you any idea why? What would it have been, like 2014? That someone was trying to 2015 that any school thought teaching Flash would be a good idea.
Man, you've done your research. Yeah, so I don't know. Our school, I was being taught by someone who would have to be in her late 60s, I'd say, and tech wasn't her big thing at our school. She was more material and fabrics tech teacher, and so for her to start doing digital tech, I think that was new for her. And I don't know why we were learning Flash, because it was already dead by the time we were starting to learn it. And then I don't know how many people were in our class, but she set us some homework to do with Flash. I think something to do with the smiley face or making it move or something. And no one did it. Not a single person in the class did their homework. And so she just kind of gave up and said, that's it, we're doing Python instead. Because I guess maybe she knew Python a bit better. And, well, I'm glad I didn't do my homework, because I can't say for certain if I would have any apps out now if I had done it.
So because her title was Material Tech, someone saw that and connected tech with technology, it sounds like. Pretty
much, yeah. Our teachers get moved around a lot in the tech part of our school. If you have tech in your name, you're pretty well doing welding, you're doing programming, you're doing everything.
Anything that isn't like the core.
Yeah, anything that isn't maths or science.
And all those. Yeah. And then, can you give us a rundown of how you got from Python to WatchOS?
Python to WatchOS. Okay, so at the beginning of 2015, I had a digital tech class where we were being taught Python from the get-go, no Flash at all. And I hated it. I thought, programming sucks. Who would want to do this? It's so boring. Not for me. And so I was of the mindset that I hated Python for quite a while, until I didn't do my homework in the second semester and I was forced to revisit it. And I don't know what it was about that second time, but when I came back and revisited it, I actually really enjoyed it. And so in year 9, I didn't do programming at school, I don't think. Not that I can remember anyway. But what I actually found was that I could use Python to automate some things in my life. And one of those things was checking for grades. So our school, we're a very, very academic school. Grades are a massive focus. And so when I'd done a test or an assignment, I could find myself checking the school website multiple times an hour for potentially weeks on end, trying to see what I got for that assignment. And it drove me crazy, refreshing all the time and, being really scared. So I thought what I'll do is I'll write a Python script which checks every 5 minutes for me. And so if it found something, it would give me a little notification to my phone telling me what the assignment was, what my grade was, and all that. And I thought this was cool. I want to make this into an app so that everyone can have it. And so that led me down to learning how to make apps, and then quickly realizing that my idea was going to be very, very expensive because I'd have to get servers making thousands of requests for thousands of students. So I kind of abandoned the idea, but I was already interested in making apps and stuff. And so I'd been learning how to make apps for about a year, and in that year I made a couple prototype things like taking the data from my school website and putting it on the phone so you could see what classes you have and all that. And then it was nearly Christmas time when I knew I was getting an Apple Watch for Christmas, and I was kind of obsessed with Reddit. And I thought, right, I want to be able to use Reddit on my Apple Watch. And I heard about some other clients which did this, but they'd all since been shut down, and I've never been able to figure out why they were shut down. But I set out to do it myself, give myself a challenge, and 5 months later I was releasing Nano.
Wow. And that was your first real experience then with making a watch app?
Yeah, Nano was my first ever watch app.
How did you feel going through the transition from making proper phone apps to the watch app developing experience?
Well, it was a bit of fresh breath air, getting to do something new after doing kind of the same thing for the last year, but it also brought upon its own difficulties. Like, making the phone talk to the watch is relatively simple. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Relatively simple in code, but for it to actually work is another matter altogether. So, as much as I'd love to say that the watch and the phone can always talk to each other with no hiccups at all, that's just not the case. And I get support requests all the time for people saying, hey, I've set it up on my phone, but the watch isn't set up. And all I can say to them is I've actually got now a set of troubleshooting steps which have, I think, 100% success rate. So now in a Nano update I release soon, that's just going to be on the setup page. It's going to have a little button that says having trouble. If you click that, it'll give you those support steps, because otherwise I'm just going to continue to get 1-star reviews over it. But yeah, so moving from the phone to the watch meant developing for a much smaller screen, developing for a slower hardware, slower computer really, and much less possibilities for me to develop things, which what might seem really limiting, but I think for beginners is actually really good, because you don't get overwhelmed with all of the potential things you can do. You only have quite a small little area to work with, so you are kind of creating little baby apps, but I think as a beginner it's a great first step, because it's easier and more difficult in different spots, but overall I'd say it's a little bit easier than developing for the phone.
And so which version of WatchOS did you start developing for, and have you seen it get easier and easier, especially now with WatchOS 5?
So I would have started with probably WatchOS 4.1, I think. Probably around there. And I wish I could say it's gotten easier or better at all. It hasn't. Not for me anyway. I think for podcast developers like Quentin developing Outcast, or Marco Iman developing Overcast, WatchKit 5 brought upon a lot of changes which really helped them, like background audio and all these things that you really need for a podcast app. And they brought upon some changes to system applications that my apps could really benefit from, but they weren't released to developers. such as WebKit. So if you're in Mail or Messages now on Apple Watch, on WatchOS 5, you can open links and see full web pages. And I thought, oh, that's awesome. That'll look great in Chirp and look great in Nano. But it just never got released to developers. So there's not much I can really do. And I'd say it's really just as difficult as it was when I started. Well, no, that's kind of unfair, because it's easier for me just because I know everything. So, Nano took 5 months to make, Chirp took 11 days. So there's, it's a massive jump in how long it took. So it's easier for me, but I don't think that's because WatchKit or WatchOS has got any better. It's just because I have taken the time to learn it and become familiar with everything.
The 11-day time frame is really impressive to me, especially considering, and this is probably what I love most about your apps, is they don't feel like they're a compromised experience of Reddit or Twitter. You get all the features that you'd expect on like a regular phone app. Like comparing Chirp to the Twitter Watch app back when it was still a thing. Like you have the ability to read direct messages, which is something that Twitter never bothered to implement into their Watch app. And for you to say that you were able to get this functionality there in 11 days, why do you think that is, that you've been able to bring a better experience than these actual like first-party companies themselves were able to do?
I think it's a couple things. So the initial release of Chirp, I think, was 11 days, but the initial release didn't have messages or lists in it. And the reason that messages wasn't included was, there's actually an important reason behind it, because in the initial build of Chirp, messages was ready to go, fully featured, and it was really just a flick of a switch in the code to enable it. But the reason it was disabled was because Twitter was changing how their API worked quite shortly after I released Chirp. And at the time of Chirp 1.0, I was still using the old API for all my messages. And so I thought, I can't enable messages now, because it means if in a month's time I haven't had any luck migrating to the new API, then I'm charging for a feature which will soon not exist. So I chose to not include it in the first one, and a week later I was able to move to the new one. But as far as why I can make apps seemingly better than, Twitter themselves, I think that comes down to risk. So for Twitter, they're paying their developers big bucks to work on, at the time they were working on the iPhone, the Mac, the Android, the Watch. I don't know if they had a Android Watch thing. So they're spending a lot of money on these clients, which means that they need the biggest return on investment possible. And when you have a watch screen as small as the Apple Watch, it doesn't make a lot of sense to display ads in the timeline, because it's just too small and you're going to scroll past, you're just going to see a bunch of ads filling up your entire screen. So your return on investment on making an Apple Watch app is actually quite small, unless you can charge for the app in some way like I do. So I think for Twitter, it's just kind of burning money to continue to support their Apple Watch app. And that seems to be the trend for Twitter and Instagram, and I think eBay and Amazon and all these developers pulling their apps, because it costs them a lot of money. Whereas for me, I'm only 16 years old. I'm not having to pay rent yet. I don't have insurance and electricity and whatever. So I can take bigger risks, because at the end of the day, the payoff isn't as important to me, which is why I make the apps free as well, because I'm more interested in having people using my apps than I am making money from them.
Another theory why that these first-party apps are being pulled is that the control over the user experience isn't quite up there. I'm led to believe that it's quite limiting what you can actually do in WatchOS.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you don't have the full UIKit in there. You're basically just moving around labels and buttons, and it can lead to more of a cookie cutter type look to apps, I guess you would say. Although, it's still flexible, I think, but nowhere near what you could do on an iPhone or an iPad.
I think I did an interview with a company called Broadsheet, and in there I said that watch apps are built on workarounds. And I still think that holds true, because there are so many things that are simple, like a pull to refresh is in every social media app out now. It doesn't matter if you're on Android or iOS or whatever, you have pull to refresh, even in system applications, and even in system applications on the watch. But achieving a pull to refresh in a third-party application on the watch isn't really possible. The closest I can get is a function in the app that can tell you when the user scrolled to the very top of the screen. And this doesn't include tapping the status bar. This is when they actually themselves scroll to the top, which is, it kind of looks like a pull to refresh, even if that's not their intention. But I have to treat it like it is a pull to refresh just so I can bring that functionality to some people. And so it's also very limiting in that if you want to design your user interface, on iOS you have a couple of options. You can design it entirely in code and just write out how you want everything to look. Or a more common approach is called storyboards, which is like a drag and drop interface for your UI, and then you have to customize everything in code. But with the watch, you are limited to just the storyboard. And not only that, you can't have more than one storyboard. So for an app like Chirp, it gets really big, and your storyboard, you think of every single screen you have on the watch. I have to have that laid out in this big, like, mind map looking thing. Except it gets quite slow because you have however many screens at once, all displaying stuff. And I thought, all right, I'll just move everything to do with settings to its own storyboard so everything can be a bit faster. But no, WatchKit doesn't support multiple storyboards. And so it's all these limitations which can make things really difficult for these big companies to work with, because they need apps to look the same across all devices. And when it comes to the watch, it's just simply not possible.
Just back to pull to refresh for a second. So that does exist in Apple's first-party apps then, so they can't be using the same developing method as you would be using then.
Well, I actually, I've been told that it exists in the Mail app on the phone, on the watch, but I haven't been able to set up the Mail app. It just, I add a Mail account to my phone, but on the watch it doesn't sync across. But I've been told that, they use a pull to refresh on the Mail app that would be...
Yeah, that's exactly where it is.
Yeah, and so does it... I haven't got any experience with it personally, but I'd imagine it's a little bit better than just scrolling to the top, even accidentally.
Yeah, you kind of rotate the crown down and it simulates a little pull to refresh.
Yeah.
And then it says checking for mail ...
Yeah, see, I can't do that in my app, which is just dumb. Another thing that I don't know if it's in the Mail app on the watch or not is taking table rows and swiping left or right on them to get some more actions, which I think would be fantastic in an app like Nano, right? You could swipe across and have an up vote button and a down vote button, for example, so it doesn't have to clog up the screen. And it's seemingly simple things like that developers just can't access. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I hope it becomes a little bit more open with time, and that's all I can really hope.
Yeah, the swipe functionality definitely exists also in the Mail app. I'm not sure if it does anywhere else. So, I mean, it's obvious that Apple's using their own internal development. I guess their own SDK.
They're you can tell they're using UIKit because there are a couple times where people say UIKit leaks, which is actually a pretty good way to describe it, where parts from the phone start to show up on the watch. And I don't know if it's there anymore, but it used to be in Scribble. If you held down on your text, then it would bring up that little highlighting selection thing from the phone, which obviously doesn't exist on the watch because that wouldn't make sense. But it's just an example of something where UIKit is showing through, which means that Apple Watch apps will always be have the potential to be much better than third-party ones, which isn't really fair for an open platform.
Right. You could also see it as just Apple's kind of testing these tools and perfecting them internally before they release them for developers to use. Yeah,
that's true also. That's quite possible, but now the Apple Watch has been out for 4-5 years now.
Yeah.
And, seemingly simple things that they've been doing on the iPhone for the last 10 years haven't come out. And so...
Well, when it was initially released, you didn't even have things like Sprite Kit on the watch that we have now.
Right, so, things are getting better. I just hope maybe WatchOS 6 makes things a bit better for developers. I'll just have to wait a year, I guess.
What's your opinion on custom watch faces?
I mean, I'm happy with the modular face as it is, but I can see why people would want to get some other ones. As far as Apple not opening them up, I disagree with them. I think, you spend $500-$600 on a watch, at least in Australia you do, and you should be able to make it look how you want. So I think a good approach for Apple would be having a, maybe even just in the watch app, a little watch face gallery with things you can download, and they'd still have to be approved by Apple, and you'd probably still have to have your developer membership. But the problem that comes up then is that developers will be able to run their own watch faces without getting approval, which is what they can do with their apps already. And so when you take, say, the Nike watch face, which is exclusive to Nike watches and is a selling point for Nike watches, I think Apple has some incentive to not allow developers to just create their own clone, because that can hurt the sales of both Nike and the Hermes, I don't never know if I pronounce it right, I think it's Hermes, watches as well, which are, the Hermes watches are so expensive, and all you really get with them is a cool band and a watch face. So I think for Apple to not allow developers to do that kind of looks like protecting sales a little bit, and also wanting to protect the appeal of the watch, because at the moment the watch is still relatively new. Smartwatches in general are still relatively new, even though they've been out for 5 years. And so you can imagine, if you're not really into tech and you glance over at someone's Apple Watch and see this horrendous mix of colours and just this gross looking watch face that they've made, then since you're not really into tech, you might see that and think that's just what the watches are, and then you're not going to want one. So I don't know, that's probably a little bit more out there as far as scenarios go, but I do wish they would incorporate them, because I'd like some. There are some things that I'd really like, but I can sort of see why they're not.
Have you picked up a new Apple Watch yet, Series 4?
I wish. I want one. I do. I really, because they're really nice. They're really fast. I really want one. But I think if I'm going to get one, I have to sell my watch first, and I'd also have to buy new watch bands, because 42mm is already pretty chunky for me, and I think 44 is just that much bigger that it'd start to look a bit cartoonish. So if I grab the 40mm, then I'd have to get new watch bands, which would be a bit of a bummer. And I've already bought the new phone, I've bought the new MacBook, and I think for me to buy the new watch would be a little bit reckless with my spending.
You might have to put a price on a Nano or Chirp to help fund it.
Well, that's the thing. So, Chirp's got over 100,000 downloads now, and it seems that anytime someone asks me that, they'll say, how many downloads does it have now? And I'll say, about, say 105,000. They go, you should have made your app cost $1, which I think is just such a terrible way to look at it, because if my app did cost $1, I might have made $100 total. I wouldn't have nearly the success that I've seen, which is, more important to me, and always has been more important than, looking at my sales each day.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think if you'd put a price on the apps, then you would have nowhere near as many downloads. And the pricing model that everyone seems to be using is make your app free and then make something in the app cost money, which is also what we've done, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I've done. And I've used a pay what you want model as well, just because, as I said before, money's not super duper important to me at this time. So it doesn't make sense for me to charge and put just one price tag on things, because everyone's financial situation is different. But I find that if someone's willing to spend $2 on an app, they're probably willing to spend $3, which is why I've given them those options, so people can actually try my app for as long as they want before deciding exactly how much they want to support me. And that model's been working really well for me. And if I develop an app in the future, at least in the next probably 2-3 years, I'm going to follow that same model.
That actually leads me to a question I've been sitting on. Do you have anything else in the pipeline, like another app that you want to work on or are working on?
At the moment, not really. The closest thing I've got to another app that I'm working on is a web browser, but turns out it at the moment it acts more like Safari's reader mode than it does a regular browser, and I doubt I'll release it separately. If anything, I'll release it and I'll build it into Chirp and Nano to get them a little bit of a better web browsing experience. So at the moment on Chirp and Nano, you can click on a link and you can see text from that page, but you can't see any images or anything like that. And so what I'm working on now is something where you can see images, you can see headers, different types of text. At the moment, I just got inline links working, sort of. So that's what I'm working on recently, but I haven't looked at it in weeks, just because I've been so preoccupied with an update that I'm just submitted before we started the show to Nano, and that's been taking up all my time over the last 2 weeks.
Does your web browser idea require any infrastructure for you to support, or can you do it purely on the watch?
Purely on the watch, yeah. So I use, at the moment I'm using a parsing library called SwiftSuit, and so that can break down the HTML into something that I can sort of comb through. It's just making sense of all that data now, which is really difficult, but also quite difficult for the watches to run. So I don't know how, the original ones, like the Series 0 and 1, will do handling it. But I guess we'll have to see.
Do you still target your watch apps at these older versions of WatchOS, and is it a pain considering how slow a Series 0 actually is?
So yeah, the lowest I target is the WatchOS 4, which does include the Series 0, and so it is a problem, and it's actually a reason I want to buy one of those Series 0 watches, just because they have their own problems that I cannot recreate in a simulator that are purely to do with memory, and so until I have a physical watch to test on, it's really hard for me to fix those problems, like Nano and Chirp simply crashing when they load the timeline because there's just too many pictures and too much text that the watch cannot handle it, and it just crashes. So it is a bit of a pain. I think come next year, I think I'll drop support, just because I won't drop support entirely. I won't remove the app. I'll just have the latest version available to them. And so I think I want to support 2 different WatchOS versions at a time. So at the moment it's 4 and 5, and next year I'll probably make it 5 and 6, which will make things a lot easier for me dropping that support for the Series 0 watch, because it's just too slow.
So looking at a kind of a longer term picture for you, what are you planning on doing, like once you graduate?
That's the tough question that everyone seems to be asking. I don't know. I don't really want to go to uni, but I know that I probably will have to. But problem is, in Adelaide, there are currently no uni courses that I can see that I really want to do that really interest me. Certainly nothing to do with iOS. And so I haven't really looked into state, but I'd imagine there'd be better things in the bigger cities in Australia, the bigger tech cities in Australia. So I think after school, I'm just going to probably take a year, maybe a little bit less. I might start halfway through the year, just to give myself a bit of a break from school, because I've been doing it for the last, 12 years now. 11 and a half. So I'm a little bit sick of it. And yeah, I'm going to give myself a bit of time off, and then I guess start pursuing a professional career in iOS development, or probably WatchOS, really.
Have you gotten any interest from companies already, just from them seeing the success you've already had in development?
I don't know, really. I've had one company invite me to come check out their office and just have a chat, which was cool. And then I think that's it. I think there's been more media interest than professional interest, which is good still. I prefer the media one because it's a lot easier to sit in my bedroom and have a chat, then get ready and go take a bus into the city. But yeah, at the moment, not a whole lot of professional interest, but hopefully that can change and I can get some job offers maybe.
Well, I think you're definitely on your way to that sort of thing because your name is out there, at least in the Reddit and the Apple Watch community. Yeah, you've got a strong name.
Yeah.
Maybe you could go work for Quentin.
Maybe. Yeah, we'll see how we go. Actually, I think I'll be meeting Quentin tomorrow night, which will be cool.
Ah, cool. I saw that you're looking for beta testers for Nano. Is that still a thing? Do we need to get the word out there at all?
Oh, at the moment, I've got over 200 of them now, which I think should be enough. There's one little problem, though. So the way I'm getting testers now is using a public link, which was announced at the WWDC this year and just got released probably about a week or two ago. And I've gotten over 150 testers through this public link system, but there's a little problem where I don't get their email and they're completely anonymous testing for me. So it's a bit bittersweet. It's sweet because the anonymity of it is good, privacy is good, so I support that. The problem is, though, is that I have no way of contacting these people now that are testing my apps. The only way I can hear from them is if they contact me. So I've got about 50 or so testers who are currently enrolled with their email, so I can email them and get their feedback on stuff. But otherwise, it's just these beta testers who I have to wait to hear from. But yeah, at the moment, I think I got enough. I don't think I need any more for now. See how we go.
And you've got most of the WatchOS subreddit behind you as well. I think willing to report anything they find.
Yeah. The WatchOS, or really the Apple Watch subreddit has been incredibly supportive of both my apps. When I released Nano for Reddit, they were behind that straight away, supporting it, helping me out where they could, reporting bugs. They've been fantastic. And then just a couple of weeks ago when the Apple Watch Series 4 came out, I posted to the subreddit, and then that got close to 1,000 upvotes, and it sat on the number one spot there for over a day on the day that the watch was released, which was, fantastic for me. And yeah, I've been really thankful for the support that they've been able to offer me. It's been great.
David, do you have any more questions before we might discuss one of the top posts on the Apple subreddit?
Sure. I think a good thing maybe to kind of wrap up this quasi-interview would be, do you have any recommendations, Will, for like other people who'd want to get into doing what you're doing? Like, how would you suggest someone starts developing for WatchOS?
Yes, I've been asked that a lot, and I changed my answer a lot as well. So the way I learned was really throwing myself in the deep end. I just opened up Xcode, hit create new app, and chose the watch and just started. And that works. I don't know how much I'd really recommend that because it takes you a long time to learn and you make a lot of mistakes, but it works. I think you really need to utilize the resources, the free resources that are out there. So places like YouTube have so many tutorials completely free. I've never paid for a tutorial in my life, so it doesn't matter, where I've got my information from. And I'm not trying to say, that I'm cheap. I'm just saying you don't have to pay. It's not something where you think, oh, I'd really love to get into developing, but I don't have the money to afford the courses or anything like that. It's not like that at all. Anyone can do it so long as you have, a MacBook or iMac, just macOS. So you got YouTube. Another tutorial site is called Ray Wendelich. He and his team released heaps of tutorials. They're really good. And then Stack Overflow. Without Stack Overflow, I wouldn't be able to make any apps. And if you're not familiar, Stack Overflow is like a Q&A form for developers. And, if you have any programming problem, whether it's a crash, whether it's just your code not compiling, you can ask Stack Overflow, and typically within a couple hours, you'll have your answer. So I think just utilize the free resources that are out there, maybe throw yourself in the deep end a bit, and you'll be able to create something you can be really proud of.
All right. Thanks for answering all the questions, Will. But before we let you go, I thought we'd do what we normally do on this subreddit and, do what we normally do on this podcast and discuss one of the posts, usually one of the top posts on the Apple subreddit. And I think the most interesting thing there at the moment, it might not be the top one, is that there's a rumor from 9to5Mac that the new iPad Pros which purportedly coming out or being announced in an event this month. Although it's the 10th and we don't have any invites yet, so I can see. But the new iPad Pros will support 4K HDR video out over USB-C. To me, that's saying that the iPad's kind of becoming a computer. So no more what's a computer. The iPad might be a computer.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting leak because the iPad's always been kind of accompanying, or like the midway point between an iPhone and a Mac. It's never been like a real standalone thing. And for it to move over to USB-C would be big as well, and I think a lot of people would be complaining about that just because all your old chargers are no longer going to work. But it's been, how many years since they were on Lightning? I can't even remember, and it's probably about time that they move to something that's just simply better at the cost of people needing to replace their chargers.
So kind of staying in the line of development here, with the iPad Pro becoming even more computer-like, and with us already having Swift playgrounds on the iPad, how would you feel about like a stripped-down version of Xcode, being able to make it all the way to the iPad so you can actually develop iOS apps on iOS?
I think that'd be fantastic, especially if they were able to bring it back to some older iPads, not just the ones that come out this month or whenever they come out, because a big limiting factor of getting into development is actually owning a MacBook or an iMac or Mac Mini, whatever, because they're expensive. Not everyone has one, but a lot more people are going to have an iPad in their house. So I think if you're able to bring a whole new, I don't really know how to word this, but if you're able to give a Xcode to a bunch more people at once overnight, then you're going to begin to see a lot more apps and a lot better apps because more people are going to get into it and you're going to see lots of new ideas and stuff. So I think it'd be fantastic to bring Xcode to the iPads.
Are you an iPad user, Will?
I'm not. I don't own an iPad. My dad or the house we own, I think it's like an iPad 2. It's pretty old now. And we never use it. We're all a phone family.
That seems to be the way of a lot of households I know. There's like an iPad there, but either no one uses it or one person uses it to watch a video once a week, something like that. But an iPad Pro, if it had a video output, that also indicates that, well, it must also have a mouse, because unless there's some sort of accompanying touch screen, but I can hardly see that being the case. So an iPad Pro with a mouse, or maybe more likely a trackpad. Do you think we'll see a mouse support in iOS?
Perhaps. With a Marzipan, I don't know if that's I think it's called Marzipan, bringing iPad apps to the Mac, sort of, more so just the using UIKit on the Macs. I don't know how well it'll work in reverse, but because apps are going to be moving and becoming more supportive of the Mac, they're going to have to become better with a mouse and keyboard anyway, because Apple doesn't sell a touchscreen computer, except for, unless you consider the iPhone and iPad a computer, but you know what I mean. So I think that with Marzipan, it would make sense to kind of bridge the gap between the Mac and the iPad a little bit, bring them a little bit closer together.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought of it that way around as well.
And just quickly, for clarity's sake, trying to play devil's advocate here, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have an alternate input device. I mean, the iPad already supports video out over the Lightning to HDMI adapter. Lightning itself doesn't support 4K just because of the speed of the port itself. So we could just be seeing a higher quality mirroring coming with USB-C and not a whole separate desktop experience.
Yeah, that's it's definitely a possibility. Probably more likely, really, than mouse and keyboard. But we can dream.
Well, on the other hand, there was just before the iPhone XS announcement, _insider on Twitter did find there was a new supported input device that was being recognized by iOS called a puck.
That's right.
Though we have yet to see what that means. It could be some kind of associated mouse or other input device for the iPad.
Possibly, yeah. That's I hadn't actually heard about that, and I'm usually up to date on his leaks. He's mental. He just finds everything that's coming out, which is it's cool.
I think the iPad announcement is going to be a lot more exciting than the iPhone one was this year. There could be quite a few exciting things coming out this year.
Yeah, not a whole lot really happened with the iPhones this year. I mean, I got the iPhone XS, but I think Apple kind of undersold what they were doing because, the processor is, they talked about how many machine learning calculations it can do and whatever, but I think they undersold the camera because the camera improvements from the 10 to the XS have been massive, and I didn't really get that impression from the Keynote. I thought it was just a little thing, but when I actually saw everything come out, it was pretty big.
The further we get away from the Keynote, the more it seems that the Keynote was just terrible because all these amazing features or the extent of the improvements are being discovered and then just reported by news outlets or bloggers or on Twitter or whatever. And you think back to the Keynote and you can't really remember that much talk about it, or the way they put it, didn't talk the feature up at all.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, they kind of dropped the ball a bit on their Keynote this year, but, I'm hoping they have something in store for the iPad one.
Maybe even a few Macs thrown in there as well would be nice.
Hopefully not a new MacBook. I just got one. I wouldn't want to have it be outdated so soon. I got the 2018 MacBook Pro, and I hope it can stay up to date for at least another, 7 months or so.
Hopefully the keyboard keeps working for that long as well. On that topic, I got my MacBook back from... I've got a 2016 Pro. I got it back from a repair about 3 weeks ago, and I've already lost the up arrow.
Oh, no.
David, you're very familiar with this story, aren't you? Anyway, I won't bore your will.
Yeah, they've had a lot of keyboard issues recently, and hopefully that's behind them.
Well, just talking about kind of broken Apple products for the moment, I wanted to touch on this, something that happened to me this week. And James, you saw this on my Twitter. I decided to take advantage of Apple's Give Back program this year. When I bought my XS Max, I opted to just send them my old 10 and let them give me the $500 and some that they said it was about worth. And my phone made it to their trade-in partner last week, and I was sent an email back from their trade-in partner saying that my phone had been reappraised for its value, and it was actually worth $0 because of the housing being severely scratched, which is crazy because, first of all, I take care of my phone, and I haven't ever even dropped it. And I have Apple Care Plus, so if it would have gotten damaged, I would have gotten it fixed.
I think I saw you post about that somewhere.
Yeah, I posted on my Twitter. So the fact that that not only is it severely scratched, but that scratches on a phone would drop its value to $0. But anyway, I selected the option to have it sent back, and I'm waiting to get my phone back in the mail, and I'm pretty worried I'm going to get a really damaged phone back in the mail.
There's no way that this can be right. I mean, they must have just mixed up your phone with someone else's.
I guess.
Did you take pictures of it before you sent it off?
I didn't actually go through the effort of taking nice pictures. The most recent picture I have is actually another picture I posted on Twitter when that puck input method was found. I plugged an old puck mouse into my iPhone through the Lightning to USB adapter. And so that's the best picture I have that's recent.
Right, okay.
So, but there's no option to dispute a charge or ask for an explanation. It's just either accept the $0 and let them keep my phone or have them send it back. Those are the only options they gave me.
It just sounds like someone is trying to pull the wool over your eyes here. Lucky you could get it back.
But yeah, fingers crossed I'm not going to get a smashed phone back in the mail.
Yeah, that'd be a shame.
Someone at the UPS or USPS went through it maybe and switched it over before I got to the trade-in.
Well, that's kind of what I'm worried about, but at least I can compare serial numbers and be like, hey, this isn't my phone. You guys owe me a phone. So, but speaking of smashed stuff, what'd you end up doing with your watch, James?
Yeah, so I smashed the screen of my watch like a week before I planned to sell it to get the Series 4. I put it on eBay just as is and got $200 for it. This is a Series 3 LTE, so without the smash screen, it would have probably gone for $450 Australian, so I got around half, which I wasn't too upset with.
Yeah, that's not bad for a smashed watch.
Actually, yeah, that's half is pretty good. If I were to sell my watch, I'd hopefully get 400 for it, maybe 450, because I've got Apple Care as well. Can you sell Apple Care? Like, can you pass it on when you sell your watch?
Yeah, I think it sticks with the device.
Alright, then yeah, maybe I could get 450, but then that new watch would still cost me an extra $150.
Yeah. All right, well, I think that's a show. I'm James VDM on Reddit and Twitter.
And I'm Jellywoot on Reddit and Twitter.
And I'm Will RB on Reddit and Will R Bishop on Twitter. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And yeah, you really slotted into that outro there really well. We'll definitely have you back on the show sometime.
All right, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you.